So if you really zoom all the way out, what is the picture of Geneva Watch Days from the overall standpoint? One, the tariffs are challenging but being managed. The opportunity coming out of that is a lean into risk, and the voices that are telling that story are significantly more diverse and from unexpected places relative to what a watch show looked like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and certainly 15 years ago.
This is Open Work, a look inside the watch industry, a podcast from Collective Horology. I'm Gabe Riley, co-founder of Collective.
And I'm Asher Rapkin, co-founder of Collective.
And hey, I get to do the intro this time. Collective Horology is an independent watch retailer based in Southern California. We carry a wide range of independent brands who are showing here at Geneva Watch Days. That includes Chapek, Ming, Sartori Biard, J.N. Shapiro, Fears, and Speak Marin. And of course, you can learn about all of those new watches from those brands at collectivehorology.com. Asher, guess what? We're in Geneva. We made it.
We are. We're currently both shoving blow dryers into our shoes because the clouds have opened up here in Geneva. The day started off beautifully, but totally poured. And I learned my lesson, which is I should pick a raincoat, not a jacket that looks like a raincoat.
In fairness to you, your jacket really looks like a raincoat, but you found out the hard way. It really isn't a raincoat.
So now that we've
never seen something that so closely resembles a raincoat look so entirely waterlogged.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It makes me feel a little bit less like an idiot. What's remarkable about that, though, is, and the reason why I had to go literally wring water out of my shoes is because the ground that we covered today was astonishing. Our first...
we got our steps in, baby.
We did. Our first Geneva Watch Days 3 years ago felt much smaller. I mean, for us as a company, but also just in general. Basically, every meeting that we had at that point was in the Beau Rivage or tied to the tent across the street. This year, the event is everywhere. And don't get me wrong, there's always been events going on inside of boutiques around the city and things like that, and an ancillary event here or there. But more than I think I anticipated, the event has grown physically and also feels, even though it's a decentralized event, much more organized, more formal, not in terms of dress and attitude, but certainly in terms of attention.
Well, even like the unofficial, like there are a few unofficial rogue events and brands showing here, but even the unofficial rogue showings are organized.
Yeah.
Like we went to a group of brands and it was like 6 brands who had rented out a restaurant and it was very professionally set up. And of course, this wasn't an officially sanctioned event. These brands aren't officially participating in Geneva Watch Days, but it was just as well run and lovely as anything that was.
Yeah, our friends from the Alternative Horological Alliance. So that's, of course, J.N. Shapiro, Ming.
Well, no, they're officially participating.
They are, but just from a physical location.
Right.
So
they had a satellite location.
Exactly.
But that wasn't the one I was talking about.
Yes, indeed. More clandestine. But for Ming, for Shapiro, for Fears, Messina Lab is part of that.
Yep.
Fleming, I believe Unimatic is not part of that, but is exhibiting with them.
With Messina.
Had built out on the entire floor of a hotel right around the corner from the Beau Rivage.
Oh, they had multiple floors. They had the ground floor set up, and then they had meeting room. Like it was, it's feeling more and more like Watches and Wonders.
Yeah. And well, yes and no. I mean, it feels that way because of the volume of brands and
Not
how
in spirit, but in how well planned it is what I mean.
Yeah. And I mean, look, let's hit the first issue right on the head, because I think this is probably what's on everybody's mind, and also certainly what was in heavy discussion with the brands, which was the tariff thing. And what we basically realized as soon as we walked in the door, and I'll be honest, I was sort of expecting it to be a little bit more of a albatross for the industry than I think it was. And we really walked away with a few key insights from today. The first is, and I'm very proud of the industry for this, and I'm really happy to hear it. A lot of folks are aligning with what I think we, and I'm sure many other retailers and folks in the business have come to, which is we're all just planning for a 39% tariff from Switzerland. But of course, we're hoping that there will be a change in the future. But, hope is great, but planning is what's critical. And what's important about that is once you start to plan, then you start to really get into the details of, well, what are we really going to do here? And the good news is that for the most part, most brands that we're talking to, whether we retail them or we don't, have come to a place of acknowledgement and a general consensus that nobody wants to price the market into oblivion.
Correct.
That's the most important takeaway here. And I'm really glad about it because you can't get to that decision until you've really processed what all the implications of this are. And it seems like a lot of folks really have. And we've all basically decided on a fundamental level that in order for this to work, and this being the industry, we all need to come together to say, well, what is an appropriate price for this product given the significant increase of the cost of goods sold? Meaning, how do we share this challenge financially between the manufacturer of the watch, the retailer/agent of the watch, and then the end consumer? So what that means is for folks out there who have been fearful that, buying a watch from a retailer will suddenly mean a 39% gross increase, that's not happening.
Yeah,
and we said
that was never going to happen anyway.
It wasn't, but I think what's key is, first of all, not only will that not happen through a retailer, but the brands have continued to say, we don't have any more to give. So to be clear here, this is not additional margin anyone's giving up. This is just less money people are making.
Yes.
But they're doing that, and we are doing that, in service of keeping prices as rational as they can be.
Let me give an example here. And this is, we'll give one example, but this is certainly in spirit, but also in specifics, true of a number of conversations we've had with brands. So you can imagine one of the things we'll talk about shortly is just how many novelties we saw. But
my God.
We would see a lot of novelties. And of course, you take a new watch in, you appreciate its design, you hear the story behind it, you go hands-on. In my case, I take a lot of pictures, all that kind of stuff. But of course, the inevitable conversation about any new watch you see is, okay, so like, how is this going to be priced? What's going to be the retail price of this watch? And in one example, we were looking at an awesome novelty from the brand we just met with, and the discussion went, okay, well, if we were to pass all of the tariffs on to the customer, in other words, not literally 39% of the value of the watch, but if we were to say the value, the cost of the tariffs to the brand and or the retailer is going to have to get tacked on to the price, this is what that would look like. And of course, that's not a rational price. So the conversation from the brand and from us was, okay, what do we think a more rational price is?
Let's pause
and
there
how
for a
can
second.
we get there?
Let's explain what we're saying when we say a rational price. So I'll make up a fake watch. Let's say that we were looking at a watch that was, we all think, fairly priced at $5,000 US before all of the tariff mishigas.
Mm-hmm.
If that was $5,000 and we had to tack on, let's say, $600 for the tariff, if that watch was already reasonably priced at $5,000, $5,600 may or may not be pushing it. However,
it depends on the watch,
this is the key
demand
point.
for the watch. It depends on what other comparable products are priced at. Depends on many, many things.
Now, someone listening to this might say, so wait a minute. What you're saying is you're going to take a really popular watch and you're going to charge more for that than you might a less popular watch. And I would say from our perspective,
not necessarily, actually.
Exactly. What we're really trying to say is when we look at this watch, let's assume that the original price had never been published. If we look at that and we say, is this reasonable for what this watch is, how it's constructed, who made it, the brand behind it, the componentry, the design, which is the most important component in terms of what something is fundamentally artistically worth at a price point, is this reasonable? Now, if we looked at that and it was like, here's a $5,000 watch, now it's going to be, I don't know, $7,000, you might say, I don't know, man, like, does that actually make sense? And the reason we need to ask these questions and really debate this with these brands is two things. One, products really should still be sold for what it is that they are fundamentally worth. And even though we as an industry are being taxed very heavily domestically here in the United States, that doesn't change a collector's perspective of whether what they're buying is appropriately priced. So what the industry is clearly trying to do here, and I'm, again, incredibly proud of how this industry is responding right now, is to ask those tough questions and say, okay, well, so my revenue might be down this year. My total net profitability might go down, but that will be in service of keeping an industry moving along and growing. And over time, as the industry evolves, finds new trade practices, new methodologies, et cetera, new structures that maybe help them, which some businesses are starting to think through. That's many months away. But as they start to consider that, things will level out. the losses to both brands and retailers, and right now, by the way, I'm speaking purely about independents. We cannot speak to the larger holding companies, but within the independents, may level out. The rougher seas calm, and then we head into something that's a little bit more manageable in the long term.
Yeah, I think the important thing here is, look, and the tariffs are a reality. We're living in a world right now where there's a 39% tariff on Swiss goods coming into the U.S. However, I can't recall any conversation I've got to sound like a politician. I can't remember really any. I don't think we had any conversations.
You can't recall?
Exactly. I don't think we had any conversations today when we were talking about the pricing of a new watch, and we looked at the brand. The brand looked at us and was like, yeah, just add the whole tariffs onto the thing. The conversation was, what does the price with all the tariffs baked in look like? Okay, where do we think we need to be between that and a price that had no tariffs in it? And more often than not, it means that we're absorbing pain and or the brand is absorbing pain to have the watch priced as aggressively as we can possibly have it. We didn't talk to any brands today who are like, oh yeah, just pass it all through. In fact, one of the brands we talked today had a release recently where they said, we're actually not going to change the price we had been planning on before tariffs and now, because, and this is a watch from a very popular brand. This was an instance where they said, you know what? We really want to have a watch that sells quickly. We want a watch that's priced in a way where it's a no-brainer for people to buy, and that's worth it. That's worth more. Like the momentum of this watch, the positive reception of this watch among the collector community, and the sell-through of this watch is much more important to us than pricing it higher so we can make as much money as we were originally planning on when we planned this thing months ago. And so one of the memes, I want to get to another meme, but one of the memes we see time and time again on the forums and Reddit and comments and things like that is, oh, this is just an excuse to raise prices on watches. And I can assure you, we are doing everything we can. The brands are doing everything we can to absorb as much of this as possible. And the reason why is, and thanks large part to your feedback in those comments and places like that through the surveys we've done in the past, we understand loud and clear that there is a lot of fatigue with price increases. So I want to get to a second myth that's come up in those same forums, which is, oh, well, the brands are planning, and this is based on something George Kern was quoted on in Hodinkee, actually in the same article we were quoted on about this sort of stuff. And George Kern had basically said, well, one of the ways we're going to mitigate the impact of tariffs is spread any cost increases, not just to the U.S., but also to other markets. And that may or may not be true of what Breitling ultimately decides to do. I was kind of surprised when he said that, to be honest, because even if you're like planning on doing that,
it was saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, it was like, why would you say that? And that sentiment or that strategy of like, oh, increase prices in other markets to offset the increased price in the U.S. came up as something today that the brands were rolling their eyes to and saying was not something they would do or not something they would think was smart. Like, that's certainly something you can do, but why would we do that? That doesn't make any sense. So I do want people to know, like, one, no one is planning, or it's not part of the discussion. And when it comes up, it's almost as a straw man, as an example of like something the brands, at least we work with, are not planning to do. In fact, the one thing they are planning to do is maybe make less money per watch in the US than they would have otherwise, not look to try to make more money in the US and more money elsewhere. That's not on the table.
Yeah. So this was another sort of thing that we saw in comments and people discussing, which was, well, I guess some brands are just going to pull out of the US. That was another thing that we weren't hearing. And in fact, I'll go further.
Quite the opposite.
Exactly. There's a lot of people that are looking at the current situation and saying, is there an opportunity for me to step into the market? So I think when we look at that, the situation is what the situation is, but the interest in the market remains strong. The desire to keep things reasonable is clearly there. And that is good news for collectors because it means that there is a wave of novelties that are being announced here.
Ooh, yeah, good transition.
Which is true. It's a wave of novelties that are being both announced here and also forthcoming over the course of the next few months.
Yeah, what's so cool about, okay, so we talked last time in the last episode, like there are so many watches releasing this week. We're going to do another episode before we get out of here about our favorite watches from the show. But there's a ton of watches that have been released for the show. The cool thing about that is because it turns Geneva Watch Days into this time frame where brands are releasing new things, it also sort of like puts them in the mood to show you their pipeline and watches that are coming. Because of course, when Geneva Watch Days started, mostly, a lot of watches weren't launching, and mostly you were going hands-on with a brand's existing collection. It was an opportunity to do that in person. But now, because of the evolution of the show, this is a time when we're getting a lot of visibility, just like we do at Watches and Wonders, into what's coming. And I think your point there may have been foreshadowing. The brands have big pipelines. We saw a lot of watches that are going to be coming out in the next 6 months to
and
a year.
Lot of transformative watches. This was something that I thought was really fascinating from today's meetings. One thing that we often hear is like, oh man, there's going to be another variant of something X, Y, or Z. And then when I take a look at, and again, speaking purely about independence, the rate of innovation and creativity is accelerating, not decelerating. And I can think of a few things. Like there was one meeting that we went to today for a very, very, very classic and highly regarded and well-established independent brand who is playing with their design language in a way that I have never seen them do it, taking new creative risks and preparing for what could be another generation of their products, another 20, 30 years of their products.
This is a good point, because this point actually intersects with the whole like tariff thing, right? What are the tariffs in one way? It's a huge disruption to the watch market in the US.
Sure.
And what it means, I think, is it's forcing brands to take more risks, because what they've realized is like, we can't keep doing the same thing we were doing before in this environment. We need to up our game.
Well,
but
these brands were doing this before. Like none of these watches were designed 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, but however, I think the conversation around them has changed. And the conversation now has gone from like, well, that's kind of a risky watch to like, thank God that's a risky watch. Like the riskiness or a watch having a strong point of view is more important now than ever because of the environment.
So I'm thinking about the meetings that we had, and in the first one there was a wave of evolution of content and product and the way that in every imaginable way. In the second meeting we had, it was an evolution of a design language that was pretty profound. Yeah. When I think about this one, we can talk about because this watch has been released. When we met with Moser today, we saw their new jump hour, and that is also a very significant evolution of that watch.
And in a world that is, awash in jump hour watches, it's nice to see a take on a jump hour from a mechanical and an engineering standpoint that's very unique and different.
100%.
Cool watch. But this is my point. If we went to meeting after meeting and after meeting, and I know the products have been in development for years, but a lot of times when you go to Watches and Wonders, Geneva Watch Days, and you go through the novelties and the roadmap, it's like, here's a new version of this watch. Here's this watch in DLC. Here's this watch with an aventurine dial. If that was all we were seeing, I think we would have been shaking our heads, which is to say, like, how can you, in an environment where you really need to go above and beyond to excite the consumer, to wake them up, you need to be different. How can you be incremental?
Okay.
And I don't think we saw a lot of incrementality. And frankly, we had the last meeting we had a conversation with a brand who was like, I was thinking of doing these 3 things. I'm not going to do them anymore. I'm actually going to do this thing over here, which is more interesting and more exciting. And is a risk I wasn't quite ready to take. Mm-hmm. But knowing that I need to bring more value to the US market, I'm going to do this project over here instead.
Yeah. And one thing,
that's kind of my point.
No, it's a good point. And one thing I was thinking about when I was thinking about Moser, because Moser, frankly, is very good at what I'm about to say. But other brands, I think, are really leaning into and taking from this. And this speaks to like things that I just love about this business. People and brands here are really leaning into these bigger stories, whether that's a literal story that the watch is referencing, like, for example, the Chapek Rattrapant RUR, which is like a very lyrical watch. It's very focused on, I don't want to talk about like the model specifically in this episode, but just if you look at it strategically, like from a business standpoint, mm-hmm. the way that they are marketing that watch, the way that they are approaching it is really tied to a very specific story, a very specific execution, and a very specific reason for existing that has nothing to do with the fact that it's the second iteration rather of the Antarctique Rattrapant.
Right, but if it was just a third version of that watch, I don't think that'd be enough today. I think the strength of that watch in this environment where you have to bring more value, where you have to bring more creativity,
Well, bear with me,
is that it's a polarizing watch.
Well, sure, 100%. But then if we look at other brands, so here's another, and I'm limiting this sort of to our brands just because these are watches that have been publicly released.
Sure.
But like the Singer Caballero is a good example of this too, where, you know, the story there isn't necessarily as tied to a specific play or book or what have you as the RUR is.
But it's a very different watch for Singer.
It's a very different watch for Singer, and it also, like, the story there is really about not only the first proprietary movement, but a proprietary movement that is modular. So it's the first chapter of a book. I mean, this is the beginning of a whole new story for Singer, and that in and of itself is not only a compelling reason for the watch, but from a business standpoint, when we zoom out, what they're really talking about, I mean, their whole marketing is about, you know, a watch with more horsepower, et cetera, 4 barrels, what have you. But really what's interesting about it is that turning of the page for them, you know, where they're not going to stop necessarily making chronographs, Lord knows, but they have this whole other thing that they're going to do now, which still exemplifies their business.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but in some way, it's like, this is Singer's first time-only watch. And it would have been enough in a previous
time
world.
only asterisk.
Well, yeah, sure. But you know, it's their first like truly time only. I guess you could say that the 1969 timer and the fly track are
No, I was saying asterisk because
watch.
it's a constant force watch.
But yes, but like this is you look at it, it's a more conventional time only watch. But exactly, I think to say it's like, oh, well, this is the opening chapter of more proprietary movements to come from Singer or whatever, I don't think that's enough. What I think makes this watch a compelling value is it's not just that. It's got 4 barrels and it has a very unique approach to delivering constant force to the gear train of the watch on several levels. And so it's also an engineering feat. And so it's like, yeah, here's our first proprietary movement. But it also goes much farther. It offers much more substance, and it offers something novel horologically. And so I think like there's an element of risk taking there. There's more value being delivered than just saying we're doing a time only in-house watch.
Yeah, 100%. So if those are two key areas, there's one last one I think I want to touch on, right? So we talked about tariffs. We talked about the lean into risk taking that's becoming quite apparent. The other thing that I find really interesting here in this space is how watch media is evolving around it, because there's a very, and I mean, this is something that we've been talking about for years, but I think we're starting to see it really come into play. I think 40 episodes or something ago, you know, we talked about the fact that we think watch media, or the future of watch media, is much more decentralized. You know, like 5 years ago, Hodinkee was king of the hill, and, you know, Fratello and Worn and Wound and all those guys.
That was watch media.
That was watch
period.
Media. Now, I mean, certainly, you know, Worn and Wound and Fratello and Hodinkee and the rest are still very much in force, and we saw them today and all of that. But what we're also seeing quite significantly in their presence and their growth is a sort of alternative decentralized media. And I'm seeing that certainly from influencers that are
ton
here.
Of content creators.
Yeah, but in addition to that, what else are we seeing? Well, we're seeing the real time show guys who are creating tons of content here, who are even affiliated officially with the show.
Official podcasting partner.
They are.
Not open work. What happened? Well, the business development team really fell down on that one.
Alan Ben Joseph is a superhuman and is capable of doing it, so God bless him. But the point is that is not who would have been the official podcasting partner.
That's a great point.
3 or 4 years ago. So that's a decentralized component. We're also seeing, in addition to the content creators, you know, we're just seeing a lot. We're seeing a lot of, we're doing this too, of course, retailers themselves creating content here, and the media. And
but don't watch that other stuff. It's terrible.
Shout out and respect to Wayco, because Wayco has been creating pretty like interesting and challenging topic panels here.
Yes,
for years, ever since day one.
That is a key difference between Geneva Watch Days and Watches and Wonders. There are panels, of course, and keynote talks at Watches and Wonders, but let's be honest, they're milquetoast. The panels Way is putting on are very thought-provoking and provocative.
100%. So, you know, much respect to Way for that.
So he's doing a panel, for instance, on like the fact that the watch industry is going through one of its most challenging times ever, between slowing demand in international markets outside of the U.S. and then U.S. policy with regard to tariffs. You would not hear in Watches and Wonders, that would not be acknowledged. It would be like, everything is great. Here's a panel on how great everything is. So kudos to Wei and to the organizers of Geneva Watch Days to be willing to wade into
if we go deeper
waters.
into the panel thing, the way those panels are constructed, like who's on them, isn't necessarily the obvious thing. Like I'll give you an example. At one meeting that we were at, we ran into Only Buying Time, and who let us know that his buddy NYC Watch Guy, these are their Instagram handles, are guests on one of the panels today. And that's critically important to me, because if you think about the way panels are structured at, for example, Watches and Wonders, you have CEOs, marketing folks, comms people on these panels. Folks are definitely like thinking about what they're saying in the way that one does when they're in a corporate role, not corporate, but like professional environment. And that just does not apply to someone who's coming in as the collector's voice. It's not their job. It's their passion. So if it's their passion, it's a whole
people
other
aren't being told what to say. They could say anything.
They could. And so if you really zoom all the way out, what is the picture of Geneva Watch Days from the overall standpoint? One, the tariffs are challenging but being managed. The opportunity coming out of that is a lean into risk, and the voices that are telling that story are significantly more diverse and from unexpected places relative to what a watch show looked like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and certainly 15 years ago. So all of this together points towards what I think we're saying in summation, which is the watch industry today is in a period of significant change and transition. Where it ends up may end up being, I hope, a place where even if prices do increase to some degree in the United States, you'll get more for it from creativity, and there'll be more voices telling that story. And that, in a market driven around art and creativity, is a good thing, in our opinion.
It is also a good thing for all the talk of how well the show is organized, how professional it's become, how many brands are here, how many content creators and retailers and industry people.
And none of those people could tell me to bring a raincoat.
Yeah, well, fair enough. All of that is true. However, and this is a good thing, I still see the vast preponderance of the attendees, at least the ones I recognize, are people who are collectors.
Yep.
Now, to your point, some of them might be notable collectors. They might have an Instagram handle with a lot of followers. They may also do some YouTube content or
plenty of collectors here who aren't even on Instagram.
Yes. Those people are here, but there are also just plenty of people who are just collectors who want to come to Geneva, who want to check out watches, who want to meet like-minded people, who want to participate and attend the programming you're talking about. So what I wouldn't want people to take away from all of this is, oh, now this is just another Watches and Wonders, because certainly in spirit it's not. The dress code is formal. The panel topics are actually interesting. But the vast preponderance of the attendees are still very much people who are collectors and enthusiasts. And you know what? That's awesome. If you're thinking about coming to Geneva Watch Days, you should.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back at you in a couple days' time with our top picks from the show once we complete it. But I'd say that was a good first day.
Once we complete the gauntlet. Yeah. Asher really wants to go to dinner. Are you excited about dinner?
I'm really quite hungry.
Asher's hungry. All right. Well, in that case, we really will leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. As always, Open Work is a production of Collective Horology. You can find us online at collectivehorology.com, where we have many of the novelties from Geneva Watch Days. And please, while you're there, get in touch with your suggestions, your feedback, or your questions. You can do that on the site, or you can email us at podcast@collectivehorology.com.